Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lindsay Bostwick, and I'm the Director of Artistic Planning here at the Art Center at NYU Abu Dhabi. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second annual season of our youth-focused career chats. Today, we are extremely thrilled to be having the founding Executive Artistic Director, Bill Bragin, in the room with us in conversation with NYUAD student, Kate Korobkova. So I'd like to pass that over, and I do want to say a huge thank you to the U.S. Mission in the UAE for support of our youth engagement program. Kate.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for introduction. I'm very happy to be here. I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is Kate. I'm a fourth-year student at NYU Abu Dhabi. I'm studying social research and public policy here, but have been dancing for over 10 years. Dancing experience has considerably shaped my undergraduate career here on campus, and now I'm working as a producing intern at NYUAD Art Center, where I, with other talented students and producers Lindsay and Lana, sort of bring Bill Bragin's Executive Artistic Director's vision for the NYUAD Art Center to life. I'm so thrilled today to interview Bill Bragin, our Executive Artistic Director. So I will pass it over to him. Bill, could you please briefly introduce yourself and tell us more about your career and how you found yourself working for the NYU Art Center?
Great, well, thank you for that introduction. I never quite understood the entire staff as existing to serve my vision. It's a very funny framing, so I appreciate that. So I've been at the Art Center for now going on 7 years, and I've spent pretty much all of my career working in producing festivals, originally starting primarily on music. So I worked for Festival Productions, which was founded by George Wein, who created the Newport Jazz Festival, which is sort of like the granddaddy of all festivals, and the Newport Folk and New Orleans Jazz and Heritage. I went on to produce festivals in Central Park, at Central Park Summer Stage. That was a multidisciplinary festival, and that's really where I started sort of expanding my reach. I was at Symphony Space. I ran a nightclub in New York, Joe's Club at the Public Theater, and then right before I came to NYU Abu Dhabi, I was at Lincoln Center in New York running 2 different festivals. But when I trace my sort of roots back, they actually first ran a concert series when I was in college, when I was undergraduate. And so that was a lot of my professional training. And even before that, when I really trace my career back, it's starting in middle school and high school, where I was a huge music fan, and I would sit around with my friends and we'd pull out records and play them for one another. And just as we were getting excited about it, it was like, here, you need to hear this, you need to hear this. And in a way, I realized that that is still who I am, and that's still essentially what I do.
It's amazing. It's so great to hear how that experience has sort of shaped your career now and brought you here, ultimately to the Art Center. So you were talking about how you spent time in your middle school with your friends. Could you please talk more about why exactly you decided to pursue career in arts? Did you have other options, or was it sort of, you were sure this is your calling, you're going for this? We would love to hear that.
Sure. Well, I think it's probably central to kind of the entry into this is that my father is a musician. He's a trumpet player and a music educator. So he taught instrumental music primarily elementary school level when I was growing up. He taught private lessons after school, and then on the weekends he played in the sort of wedding and bar mitzvah circuit. So first, music was always around. It was always valued. My mother was an amateur pianist, and at various points, she also worked with my dad in some of the what they call the club date business, kind of organizing events for affairs. So they were both music fans. That was always really present and was never questioned. And I think that for me, it was always a passion. It was always there. I was also a really good student. I was involved in a lot of extracurriculars. I was very shy when I was young, so I started working behind the scenes. I worked on the school plays in lighting. Eventually, I started moving out and started acting and performing in school plays. I was involved in Model Congress. Eventually, my senior year, was the head of the Model Congress, so I started organizing events when I was also in high school. So in a certain way, that career path was sort of created for me. And then when I got to university, I went to a small liberal arts college, not unlike NYU Abu Dhabi. I studied sociology, and that was what I was interested in intellectually, academically. And then I worked on the concert series, and I worked on the radio station. And I didn't necessarily think that the two needed to be connected. It was, in a way, what I studied was what I was interested in, just for myself. And then I thought of my extracurriculars as what I was doing to prepare myself for a career path. It was pretty clear, I think, pretty early on that I wanted to find my way within music. I also grew up playing. And when I got to college, I realized that there were a lot of people who were a lot more talented than I was, and that I would rather kind of stand behind my taste and not by my skills. And so it was also realizing the satisfaction in supporting other people's work that I wanted to share.
Thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting to hear sort of your academic background and sort of studying social research as well as pursuing a career in arts. And could you tell us a bit more about your academic background? Has it influenced how you see arts at all, maybe in your university, maybe your final thesis that you were writing? Could you share more about that and how you see those two converge?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I was aware of it at the time, but it wasn't until probably 10 or 15 years after I graduated that I started really becoming aware of how I had brought those two strands together in my work. So when I first started studying sociology, I was taking a lot of classes on prejudice and race and power and sort of structural sociology. But I was also taking sociology of popular culture. I took a class in art and anti-art and Dadaism. I also, on the side, took a history of jazz. And then there was a class that really kind of broke my mind open my freshman year, which was in the music of Frank Zappa, which really became a survey of like 20th century experimental music and the way that Zappa pilfered from all of it. Within some of those classes, I started really looking at, first, there's an organization called the Black Rock Coalition, which was founded by Vernon Reid, the guitarist from the band Living Colour, Greg Tate, who is primarily a music critic as well as a band leader, and Conda Mason. And the mission of that organization is that rock and roll is Black music and we are its heirs. And at that time, there was this real sort of separation of musical categories by race. And so they were really kind of pointing to the legacy and the history of rock as part of the lineage of African-American music. And so I presented Vernon Reid and Living Colour as part of the concert series. I became really interested in the Black Rock Coalition. And so then I interviewed him and I wrote a paper about the roots and about sort of the history of appropriation of African-American culture within the arts. That, I think, led me down this sort of path of a little bit integrating what I was studying. For my senior paper, I wrote a paper about jazz history and swing music and bebop music and the relationship of the shifting from one style to another, both in terms of symbolic assertions of power and the relationship with the rise of the Black nationalist movement. So, I was definitely looking at those relationships. In my career, a lot of the places that I've worked have been very large institutions that have sort of a central civic role. So Central Park, Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, which is a preeminent performing arts center in New York City, even at NYU Abu Dhabi as part of the Saudi Cultural District, I'm aware that the places in which I work are commons. They are meant to serve a very broad cross-section of the public. And within that, the choices of who's on stage and who's in the audience are really central. And that I think my lens into the art is always within the social context. I'm always thinking about those questions of economics, the questions of power, the questions of representation, the questions of inclusion, and my role within those. And that I think has shaped the way that I think about my work as a curator.
It's very interesting to hear because I think most of us have experienced that pressure that goes into deciding sort of what career to pursue, especially if we feel like sometimes choosing a specific field of work or study is very limiting for us. So thank you for sharing that. And what can you share from your multidisciplinary experience that you think could help high school students or university students right now to make choices, whether what to study or how to pursue career in arts overall?
I think probably that first suggestion relates to your last comment about sort of the how to plot a career path. And my career path, I think, was a little bit more straightforward than most of my friends. I had a pretty clear idea where my passion was. I followed it at various points when I started finding that my jobs, because some of the roles I was also working on corporate marketing as part of the organization. And when I started feeling like I was getting too far afield from where my love was, I left the job and I took another job for less money because it would help me to kind of course correct. But a lot of my other friends have not had straightforward paths, and particularly starting out, I would say don't worry about it so much. People's career paths can really zig and zag, and you don't have to plot every move. You don't have to, when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, plot out like exactly what jobs you need to get you to where you want to be 5, 10, 15 years from now. I think following your passion, following your heart, and then learning what you can in terms of transferable skills is really important. I think, again, when I talked about working on the Model Congress, that wasn't an arts event, but it was producing a very large scale event with participants from other high schools. We had to worry about housing, we had to worry about programs, we had to worry about printed matter, like all of the things that are part of organizing artistic events were actually part of organizing Model Congress. And so I'm also really a big fan of understanding the transferable skills, understanding the details that you learn in one field, and how if you have an office job in something that's completely unrelated to where your heart is, the skills that you're gaining in that office job can be applied as you kind of find more opportunities. The other thing is the way that I sort of had my extracurriculars and then what I did sort of full-time as a student. I think that also works in the work world. So if you get a job, if you want to pursue a career in the arts, but the jobs that are kind of available to you in the beginning are not arts jobs, take the jobs that will kind of support you and allow you to kind of live and thrive and grow. But then go to a lot of events, volunteer if you can, find a way to kind of meet the people who are in the places that really feed you, because often it's those relationships down the line that can then be turned into a job opportunity, even if you don't start there.
That's really great to hear. That's a great advice, because I think so often when we think, well, there are no job opportunities in this particular field that we want to pursue, we choose not to sort of pursue it at all, and give up on those dreams that we have. So thank you so much for giving that advice. I think a lot of students will find that very helpful. So now that you have spent years working in the arts and your experience reaches from co-founding a not-for-profit music festival to speaking worldwide, producing, and thinking about that vast experience, what would you say is your strength?
I think my strength, which I joke about but don't joke about, which is also a kind of a more recent discovery. I think my strength in part is that I am kind of mildly ADHD. And because of that, I tend to I tend to think laterally. I tend to make a lot of connections. My way of working is more intuitive than methodical. I sort of consume art and media pretty voraciously. And so I've got a lot of information that's sort of floating around. And then I'm able to connect those dots. I think the other thing that I learned when I was running Joe's Pub, a nightclub, we were presenting 2 shows a night every night of the year, booking 500 plus artists per year. I needed to actually be able to work in that kind of volume to thrive in that job, but I also needed to surround myself with people who could take care of the kinds of details that also don't work with me. So I think understanding a little bit of how my mind works and also where my weaknesses are, and making sure that I have people who I like to, I like to throw a lot of balls in the air, and I usually like to run away before they fall down, as the people who work with me know. It's really important to surround myself with people that I can trust, that I know can sort of catch them and keep them moving.
Thank you so much, Bill, for this. How do you see the pandemic shifting the process of entering the industry? I think right now there are so many students that are considering the arts, and for those of people who are already working there, they are kind of adapting to those shifting experience in the workplace. But what about people who are just entering? How do you see the pandemic changing that?
Well, it's best of times and it's worst of times. It's really difficult. And for me, and I think a lot of people who are working in live performance, part of the attraction is the moment where you're all gathered together as a temporary community, and the artists are on stage and the audiences are all together, and you're breathing the same air, and you're sort of sharing these big moments. And that is where the adrenaline comes. That's where the epiphanies come. That's where you start to really just find the inspiration. And that's been what's been lost, right? And that there's a flattening that I think has been hard to work through. And it's been hard for institutions. It's been hard, especially for smaller organizations and for people who rely on touring, on gig economy, on working on shows and get paid basically, for the work as opposed to being on salary. The flip side is that everybody who's got access to the internet and who's got access to Zoom, all of a sudden has access to an international audience. And there is this moment of reinvention and of entrepreneurialism, and all of a sudden I can go to a theater festival in Poland, or I can go to an arts conference in South Africa and make connections in ways that I never would have before. And those have really, I think, transformed our work. We just finished an online theater project with a group of theater makers from Kenya that came because I was at this arts conference kind of led in South Africa. I met someone from Kenya. We interacted. We've never met in person, and we just created this really amazing collaboration because the internet has sort of flattened those relationships and given us access and allowed us to do it with a different kind of resource and a different kind of relationship. So I think that there is an opportunity to reinvent, and then to think about what's important and what you want your art to accomplish.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's easy kind of to notice that there are changes that are happening right now in the networking as well, and from in-person to digital world, where artists have to adapt to that. So thank you for kind of underlining those differences. So there are different ways of how artists navigate the art world right now. By the way, just to let our audience know, in a few minutes we will be taking questions from the chat. So please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We will have a chance to ask Bill that in a few minutes. Another question I have is specifically for the interns or people who are trying to be interns in the art industry. So what advice would you give students who are yet to start their first internship, who haven't entered the industry yet? What do you personally look for in an intern? How would you make that decision when you hire someone?
That's a great question, and it's a huge question. I think the first thing that I would say is that that there is no task that is too small, and that it's important to understand that if you're producing events, if you're kind of working on a large scale performing arts center, all of the work ultimately is a combination of many, 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 many small details. And it's important to actually understand how every decision and every detail is taken care of kind of adds up to the greater success. And I think it's sometimes difficult, especially if you are someone who is at the top of your class and you thrive and you kind of have a sense of yourself as a kind of a leader, when you're asked to do something that feels a little bit menial, sometimes that can feel demeaning, but actually it's really essential. And I still think about some of the lessons that I learned. My first internship, I worked for a festival in Philadelphia with the publicity department. And one of the things that I learned was how to fold the press release and put it in the envelope. And there was talking about a Z fold instead of a C fold. And with the Z fold, the letterhead is on the front. And then when you pull it out, you kind of pull out the whole press release and you scan it. And just in that really simple act, there was an idea of branding. You open the envelope and then you immediately saw who it was from, and it started to make an impression. And it made it a little bit easier for the end user. And then we went and we walked the press packets to the newspaper, and my boss walked around the halls hand delivering them to people in the newsroom. And again, in that moment of hand delivering, she was building personal relationships with all these press people. And so realizing that these really tiny details were actually super important was great. I think I actually literally got a job running a record label. And I had never worked in the record business. I didn't know anything about running a record label, but there was somebody who I had worked with on a festival, and it was the day before the event. He was looking through all the press kits where we were announcing the festival, and he noticed his name was spelled wrong in the press release. And it was a multi-page press release. They were all stapled together. They were all like assembled. And he was upset. And then he's like, all right, I'll let it go. He left. And then that night I disassembled every press kit. I unstapled everyone. I redid that one page, made sure his name was spelled right. I restapled them. I put them back together. And so when he got to the press conference the next day, at some point he realized that it had been changed. It was hugely important to him that he was actually credited properly. And nobody asked me to do this, but I recognized his hurt. It was literally because of that experience that when he was founding a record label, he approached me and said he liked my spirit, he liked my attention to detail. He knew that I didn't know what the job was that I was going to do, but he had comfort in my ability to learn it. And I really it was the act of unstapling and replacing pages with the right spelling that led me to that job. And he's become a very dear friend and a close supporter kind of throughout. So again, the small details are really vital. The other thing is, if you're looking for a job, especially more of an entry-level job, there are two approaches. Either you can kind of start at a slightly higher level in a specific department, or you can often start as like an assistant for somebody at a high level, but you're at a kind of a lower level on the totem pole. I started my career that way. And what I found is that if you're the assistant, if you're the intern on somebody who's more of a generalist, you actually learn the whole business in a different way. And you're in the room for conversations, and you're taking notes, and you're writing correspondence for your boss, and you're screening phone calls, and you're building relationships. So sometimes the seemingly lower level job, if it gives you access to a broader scope, can actually be the better way into kind of an organization to move your career path forward.
Thanks, Bill. That actually feeds a bit more into what you talked about earlier, about sort of following your passion and liking what you do and doing what you love, because those details really shine through when you're doing something you're genuinely interested in. And that initiative really shines through when it's something that you actually want to learn and not just doing something to put on your CV or to put on your cover letter. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I have so many
and
questions.
actually, but before you go, there was just one other thought that came to mind is when you asked, what are you looking for? Often whenever I'm interviewing somebody, if I see in a cover letter or if I am interviewing somebody and somebody talks about how they want to sort of develop their CV or develop their credentials because they want to do something in the future, that to me, often that person is a no. I really want to know that the person's passion and interest is in this job, in this organization. Why do they care about the mission? Why do they want to be here? Of course, everybody recognizes that people are kind of looking at kind of career growth in the long term. But in general, I don't want to hire somebody who's just looking at this role as a stepping stone. I want to look at it as a place that they really want to be and contribute. So I think that's important, and that comes through. The sincerity really comes through, I think, when somebody really is passionate about something. So again, when targeting where you want to work, I think it's important to kind of really look at, like, is this a place that I'm really committed to what they do?
Right. I think, yeah, that goes also into honesty at a workplace and being honest with with the people you work for and putting kind of your best into that workplace. Thank you. I have so many more questions to ask, but there are questions in the audience. So I'm going to read one we have. Bill, why did you decide to continue programming during the pandemic? And what does it mean to you, the Art Center, artists, and the audiences?
Wow, that's a great question, and it speaks to, there was a plaque that I kept on the wall in my office for a really long time. I actually need to put it back up, by a puppet theater company from Vermont in the US called Bread and Puppet Theater, and it's the Why Cheap Art Manifesto. And essentially it boils down to, art is not luxury, art is food. You can't eat it, but it feeds you. And I think that during the pandemic, we really realized that art is essential to living. It's essential to processing your emotions and your thoughts. It creates connections with strangers over time, and you could even do that, I think, with online presenting. And so I think sometimes people sort of dismiss art as entertainment or art as luxury. And I think that during the pandemic, we really realized that it was actually art that got people through, whether people were binge watching on Netflix, or whether people were reading books, or whether people were standing on their balconies playing music with strangers. But it was really art that helped people survive incredible trauma. And it is art that I think is going to help people sort of take stock of what they learned through this really difficult time. And so I think that was really one reason why we did it. And also it's what I know, it's what I do. And it's been at various points in history. I started at Joe's Pub in New York a week before 9/11, and the club was downtown, and downtown was shut off. And we had to sort of figure out what do we do in the sort of recovery and return from that. The record label that I ran was based in New Orleans, and I watched New Orleans underwater during Hurricane Katrina. And there's this question when things are really big and you feel really powerless. And then I remember having a conversation with one of my friends who I used to work with. They said, well, we present events, like, let's do the work. And I realized that, like, by putting on concerts by artists from New Orleans, for example, I was hiring a lot of people. That money went back to rebuild the community. It was also really important psychically for those artists to be able to represent their city when a lot of them were displaced from their city. So I think it is, again, there's sort of an economic aspect. It was important for the Art Center to keep paying artists, to keep paying managers, to keep commissioning work, to keep money flowing, because people were losing their livelihoods in a matter of a week or two. So I think also that was part of the responsibility for NYU Abu Dhabi as a larger institution to also realize that we only exist because we've got artists that we're presenting. And if we are not caretaking them, and that's sort of part of the definition of curating, right, is caretaking. If we're not taking care of the artists, then we're not serving our mission.
That's very interesting that you said caretaking. I think so many artists would agree, and even me as an artist, as well as a dancer, that so often that doesn't shine through in the art industry. And it's so amazing to see how the art center sort of takes care of the artists and make sure that, you know, there is that connection established when artists come and perform, and even after, that is more like an exchange other than sort of, you know, having an artist come once and, you know, having that just program filled out and that's it. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think the next question kind of feeds into what you just said about the unexpected things in the art industry. So what are some of the unexpected parts or challenges of your current role in the Art Center?
I think there's so many. You know, part of it is that this has been a startup, and now it's moving as we enter our 7th season. And so as an organization, you go through sort of a different life. So I think it's realizing that that I need to learn more about entrepreneurship and about, you know, kind of how companies kind of incubate and grow, and how do you kind of keep developing, and what do you hold on to, and how do you sort of continue to expand the role that you play. I think within the Arts Center, it's part of Saadiyat Cultural District, which is really, it's a very important initiative for the government of Abu Dhabi, and the UAE is really investing in the arts. And I think learning increasingly the role that our work as a performing arts center plays in the kind of in the national development and international development, and the role in international relations. We work with lots of embassies who become our partners, like the US Mission, who are partners here. That has been unexpected. I think also you sort of touched on this idea of relationships and the exchange being important. And in some of the previous work that I've done, festivals and nightclubs, it can sometimes be a little bit more transactional, and particularly working in the context of university and having relationships with students over the course of 4 years, and then students graduate and some have continued to work for us, or I've watched their kind of careers as artists as they move through the world, and we've stayed in touch. And it's those relationships and sort of tending to the long-term growth, and thinking about it again in more of a relationship basis and not a transactional basis, I think has also been one of the most important sort of transformations that I've experienced, particularly since coming to NYU.
Thank you. Our next question is, how do you adapt your program to Abu Dhabi and the UAE? How does it support homegrown talents?
So we do a lot and want to keep doing more. I think one of the things about Abu Dhabi is that it's incredibly diverse, and it's also incredibly transient, right? So you've got a population where the Emirati national population is a relatively or a very kind of small percentage of the overall population, and as the country grows, that will change even further. And so it's really important that I think within the country, that idea of Emirati culture not getting subsumed by international culture is a really important issue to constantly think about. And so finding ways to make sure that that our programming is inclusive of our host culture is central. But we also, in the university, we've got students from 115 different countries. In the country, there are people from about 200 different countries. There's people coming with very different experiences and not always so much common ground. And so the arts are in a certain way create that shared history. And so I think a lot about work, not that is sort of sinking to the kind of to the common denominator, but actually art that's really specific, that a certain sector of the community and the audience can really embrace as their own and then share it. And that I think people in the UAE, often because they come from somewhere else, are also curious and they are open to kind of new information and new styles. And so it's always important to kind of bring people together and have that moment, again, of exchange. Within from a structural level, we have certain programs that are really devoted to platforming locally based artists. Rooftop Rhythms was an open mic that preceded us. When I first arrived, it was one of the places that people pointed to and said, you need to check out Rooftop Rhythms. It's an open mic, it was primarily spoken word and poetry. And at the same time, Dorian Rogers, who founded it, also had a soul open mic. And so there was kind of an independent music scene. And eventually we invited them to come to the campus when they lost their venue, and realized that that was really great because some of the people who get on stage are very, very accomplished and perform regularly, and others are getting on stage for the very first time. And having a place where people can just start out and then be informally mentored by people who are more experienced than them is also really key. I think as a dancer, you probably experience it sort of in dance circles, right? Where somebody steps into a circle and is dancing with strangers, and to get the courage up to step into a circle with people who are better than you is actually the best way to improve. Is, you learn in part by not being as good as you want to be and aspiring to get better, and then having somebody give you kind of a hand. So Rooftop Rhythms has been really key, and we've been hosting that now for 6 years. We have a National Day event called Hikaya, where we often draw from a lot of these same artists, but rather than being an open mic, we're really featuring their work. And now we're moving to a point where we are commissioning work from locally based artists who have been in our audiences. We have a lot of, as part of our Off the Stage series presented by Bill Bragin, we have arts chats, which are about career path. We have workshops, which are about building skills. And often the artists who are coming through that, or now we created a new platform called NYUAD, which is about professional development for artists. All of those start to strengthen the local artists so that increasingly they can really kind of appear side by side with all the visiting artists we're bringing in from outside the country.
That's very interesting what you mentioned about connecting people through art. I think that's very pronounced here in Abu Dhabi and UAE, where you meet people from all over the world, but you might not get to know them. You might just bump into them in the cafeteria or in class. And I think when you go to those art shows like Camille Brown Dance Company or Barzakh Festival, so suddenly you find yourself sort of knowing more about their background that you didn't before. And now there's a different connection between you. That sort of intimacy is now there through art. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite moments of being in an audience is like when you've got some people who are singing along with the audience and they know the songs and they know the rhythms, and there's somebody else who's never heard it before and they're like, this is amazing, but what's going on? And then the person next to them starts maybe translating the lyrics in their ear, or they say, oh, this is actually a rhythm that comes from weddings, or this is like a celebration, or my grandmother used to sing me this song. And that, like that moment of exchange where you've got somebody who really understands the art and its cultural context and what it means, and somebody whose sort of mind is being expanded because they're encountering it for the first time, and that's what brings them together. That is, I think, one of the favorite dynamics about being in an audience.
Yeah, and it's so nice to see how you take that sort of specific location that we're in and context we're in, and kind of bring that together to form the unique program that we have and all the shows and the artists that we bring here to Abu Dhabi. We have so many questions in the chat, but I would encourage students to be involved with the Art Center as much as possible and come to shows so you can learn more about what goes into planning and what goes into bringing artists here. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining, for being vulnerable and sort of straightforward, talking about what it's like to be in the art industry today. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I'm sure students will find that very helpful, and I personally really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. So thank you for finding time and joining us. We are running out of time, so I will give it over to Lindsay for a short outro, but thank you so much everyone for joining, and thank you, Bill.
Great, thank you so much for the great questions.
Hey everyone, wow, that was such an incredible conversation. Thank you so much, Kate and Bill, for opening our eyes and inspiring us as to Bill's career path through the years and how young artists and students today can get involved. And thank you all for joining us. We hope that you tune in later this month where we speak with our front of house and box office manager, Thais Edwards, to hear a little bit more about her career path and her role here at the Art Center. Again, I want to thank the U.S. mission to the UAE for supporting our youth engagement program and all of our sponsors for the work that we do. If you're a student and you want to get even more involved, I really encourage you to go to our website, the Art Center at NYUAD, and hear a little bit more about our off the stage and our performances. And we hope you see you at the Art Center very soon. Thanks, everyone.